This is Rick Stawley. For those of you that are waiting, welcome to the call. We'll get started here in just 1 minute. We'll start at the hour. And welcome. I hope this conversation today in this webinar helps you in moving your business forward. Talk to you in a minute. All right, let's go ahead and get started. You can see from the screen what our subject matter is. If you didn't remember in the announcement at the last webinar a month ago, 7 steps to increase discipline in your life. Though I think I had said 6, but it grew a step since I announced it. I can't believe I'd almost left out probably, arguably, the most important. Certainly it's the first thing we need to attend to when it comes to discipline. And when I started understanding these things about how to get myself organized, anyway, let's go ahead to the first slide, and I'll address it from there. Lack of discipline, while it may not be the greatest enemy of the system, actually not having a system is the greatest enemy of the system, but lack of discipline is a severe issue when it comes, obviously, to running the system. If you owned a McDonald's restaurant, you didn't have the discipline to show up when you're supposed to show up and do what you're supposed to do and run the French fry machine and all the things that cause that quote-unquote quality control and standardization and that makes it such a business machine, you have a real problem in your business. Most people are not very disciplined. You know, I include myself in that category. Now, it's interesting because through the years, at different times, people have come to me and said, I can't believe how disciplined you are. But the reality is that I was not disciplined. My parents had some real legitimate concerns about me into my 20s that because of my lack of discipline, I just as soon sit on the beach and watch the sun come up and the sun go down. Actually, I don't get up early, wouldn't get up early enough to see it come up. But I certainly was there in time to see it go down. And I was pretty casual in my approach to life, and so any misconception any of you might have had that I was very disciplined is both correct and incorrect. Incorrect in the sense that I certainly wasn't born with it. I hadn't developed it in my teens or in my early 20s, but I did develop it because of a combination of things that had a huge impact on my ability to do things in a timely way and in a consistent way. I was probably a world-class procrastinator, and I had to overcome some measure of that habit in order to become successful. The bottom line is discipline is a habit that's got to be built. You don't have to be born with it, I'm here to say. I know you know people that when you meet them, you know they're already disciplined. We hear about athletes that are super disciplined about their practice, marathoners who do pay this incredible price. And I could give you a lot of different stories of things that I've heard too. But the reality is that isn't most of us. And the good news is you didn't need to be born with it. And you didn't need to be raised in a family that did it. You didn't need to be some kind of great athlete that developed all this discipline. You can build it here and really get your act together and move into a world-class level in this business by the things that we're going to discuss here today. Now, the point is, without it, the system loses most of its horsepower. And so, knowing that this is our task, we need to become more disciplined. I think probably most of us on this phone call would have a goal of being more disciplined about our work, about making calls, about running the system, about following up people, all these things that we need discipline to pull off. We'd agreed in 2012 we'd like to have more of it. And so we're going to talk about it with the perspective of how to help you increase your discipline for the balance of 2011 and then have a banner year in 2012. As long as the company's going strong, you might as well be going strong too. And if you're already going strong, and if there's no question in my mind, with some added discipline, you can really make some things hot. So let's talk about, of the 7 things, the first one. Teamwork in the home. I do not believe that a family working together is twice as strong. I believe they're at least 5 times stronger. It's an exponential growth. If it's just you and your sweetheart, you guys working together be 5 times stronger than just the concept would seem to imply. When you think about it, it's the best source of emotional support and encouragement. And goodness knows we need that to remain disciplined. Because one of the big enemies of discipline is discouragement. And the greatest source of encouragement in my life, from a mortal standpoint, I do a lot of praying and that encourages me. But from those around me, by far, the strongest source of encouragement in my life is my wife. Cindy is so consistent. Cindy is so consistent in her expressions of love and support. And I know she's always behind me. When I'm coming home after a tough day, it's not as tough because I know I'm coming home to her, and then I'll fall asleep next to her and I'll wake up next to her. And all of this means the world to me. And so that's why you've heard me say, if you've heard me talk about this, the most important recruit you'll ever have is your sweetheart. And it's a big deal. And so that the bottom line is we want to make sure that we've got things going right in the home, that they're the folks that we want to keep the happiest. If you're struggling with that, be patient with it. It isn't an overnight sensation. By the way, when I started making money, my emotional support increased. Some of the funniest stuff I've ever heard was Jack Linder talking about this. Once I was listening to him at a team meeting, and he said early in the business he'd come home, from the appointments at night, and he'd be hungry, and he'd say to, his beautiful, loving wife that to Linda, and he would ask her, "Can I have something to eat?" She said, "I'm sorry, the kitchen's closed. You can get some cereal." But when his income started increasing and it got up to a pretty healthy monthly amount, he'd come home and she'd say, "What do you want to eat?" And he tells it much better than I do and is much funnier, especially in Texan. But the reality is that's true. And one of the things that really helps with discipline is accountability. And because Cindy understands the business so well, she understands what I'm supposed to be doing. She knows if I'm sitting around the house, I'm in trouble. And she starts following me up. I can't even tell you how much discipline that added in my life. Sometimes it was a little annoying. But the reality is, I tell people, you make sure your sweetheart knows what you're supposed to be doing so they can follow you up, because no one's going to be around you more. No one's going to understand better what you need. And so teamwork in the home is the number one thing about adding discipline and accountability to your business life. It's wonderful. Now, what if you're single? I think you've got to tie into leadership that much more. And we'll talk about that in a minute too. Next one, number 2. You've got to align with leadership. I want you to picture yourself somewhere in that line of ducks. If you're the leader, hopefully you're worthy of aligning with. This is the thing that if you're single, you got to do even more diligently. Something I learned and was taught to me by my mentors early in the business is that alignment in an organization creates velocity in that organization. It's a lot easier to move on down the road at higher speeds if the team is working together. And one of the things that helped me with my discipline was I aligned with my leadership. And so that I could get coached, and I'll talk more about this in a minute. This is different than pure mentorship, which I'm about to discuss. But the reality is your team will copy what they see. And so one of the things you want behind you as an aligned team that kind of forces discipline upon you. They're there, they're showing up for meetings, you got to be there. They're early, you got to be earlier. They stay late, you got to stay later. And it just helps you in your focus and in your work ethic, which is tied very closely to your discipline. And so it increases velocity in the organization. You're copying better because you're aligned. Your team's copying you, and you're more of a master copy because of alignment. And once again, surprise, it increases accountability. When you're aligned with leadership and you're around and you're part of things, then that changes the way things turn out in your business. And you can look at people who aren't aligned with leadership, and you usually see a good deal more struggling. And now, one note to leaders. You want people aligned with you, you got to treat them right. You know, you got to be living a decent life. You will sow the seeds of your own disaster by not doing those things, because people aren't going to follow you. They'll quit, which is really lax discipline, and you maybe have given them good reason to do so. You know, and none of us are perfect, but we've really got to work hard at treating people right and living a decent life so people are proud of us, proud to associate with us, and then are much more likely to align themselves with us. That should make sense to you without me having to explain a lot more about that. But you've got to have that clear in your head, your responsibility to do what's right and to choose the right kind of behaviors so that you don't basically run your folks off or become the greatest source of discouragement in their life. You certainly don't want to be that as a leader. You want to be the opposite of that. Let's take a look at the third thing. Now I'm going to talk, I'll try to spend a little bit more time on this slide. When you study success, and when people who are a lot smarter than I am have studied success, people with tremendous amounts of research and great educations, even brilliant people, pick this as perhaps the number one reason for success in people's lives. One of the things we've got to do is change. One of the changes we're talking about here is becoming a more disciplined leader. That change has to be mentored in the great majority of situations. You know, coaches are to athletes what mentors are to business people, if you will. It is a critical area. And you'll notice the first bullet point up there. It minimizes bad decision making. You know what? If I was only going to put one reason up there, that would be plenty of reason. I illustrate something. Someone gave me a call as I was coming back from a team meeting, and it was someone out of state, just someone I had a relationship with, someone in my hierarchy, and they were very capable, but they had made some bad decisions that I'd been unaware of economically. Even though I coached in this area and warned people in this area, they'd kind of gotten some bad advice from their own upline, and they'd overextended themselves financially. And he was calling me now after all these problems were in his life, and he was out of reserves and he couldn't afford, anyway, all kinds of issues that way economically, financially. And I said to him, wow, I wish you'd called me before you called these shots, before you made these decisions. We would be having a completely different kind of conversation right now. You'd be excited, things would be under control, your income would be sufficient, and you'd be playing loose, your wife wouldn't be on your back, all of these things that have came from just bad decision making. Bad decision making is an enemy of discipline too, obviously severely, because now you get rattled, you get, again, discouraged, you struggle, and depression is not conducive to discipline and work ethic. And so mentor relationships help you minimize bad decisions, dodge a lot of bullets, and stay out of quicksand. They'll show you the right way. You've heard me talk about, some of you, if you're having to cross a minefield, which isn't that much fun, it'd be really nice to know where the landmines are so you don't step on them. And a mentor helps you identify where not to step and where to step. And so my reaching out to senior leadership early in my career, other than my wife's support, I credit for being my number one thing. And maybe I should put this before aligning with leadership, but I aligned first, and then that communication and that association, they saw me taking it seriously, made my leaders more willing then to move to the next level where they mentored me. And so we've got to do our part. One thing about mentorship is it increases confidence and focus. Now let's talk about how come it does increase confidence. I would call my mentor and I would run some thoughts by him about what I was thinking about doing, what I thought needed to be done, or I would be asking questions about how he thought I ought to get it done, and then I'd be interacting with it. And by the time we were done with the conversation, I had clarity about what I wanted to do. I had confidence that it was the right course of action. And when you know that you have the right course of action, right, you're bolder because of that confidence. And I was more focused on what to do because I talked it out, and because of that clarity. Mentor relationships made me seem real discipline because I wasn't making bad decisions, right? I was talking to somebody who already knew what I should do. My confidence and focus was increased, and my boldness was increased, and all of that led to me being there, making it happen, seeming decisive, because I was. The other thing is, tying back to the first one, is you stay on your success track. Again, that kind of ties back to not making bad decisions. But now, when you're past, you have some mileage and you have some experience, now you just have to be careful not to let overconfidence become a problem. Or you think, I don't need any help anymore, which is just usually a really bad decision. And so I stay close to my mentor relationships. And by the way, there was one main one, then I added a second. All right, of a person above them, and is actually the founder of that company. I would go to other workshops where I'd hear other successful leaders, and I'd take a tip from them, or take an idea there, or how to do a better follow-up interview, or how to be a little bit better referrals. But I stayed in the main part of the counsel I was getting and the system I ran. Would focus on one person. You can't have 12 mentors, not at that level. You can get input from a bunch of people. In that sense, they mentor you slightly. But I stayed focused with two very aligned leaders. One was the top field guy in that company. The other one was the founder. And they were both aligned. And so I was aligned with the two of them. And I took counsel from both of them. One was a little bit stronger on inspiration and motivation and personal relationships. The other one was stronger on the system and the pieces of the puzzle that way. And so they were really compatible in how much they helped me. And by the way, this is the third time I've said it, this also increases your accountability. And so having your sweetheart know what's going on and having teamwork in the home increases your accountability. At home, alignment with leadership increases your accountability. You're showing up, reporting, and then you reporting and counseling with your mentor also increases your accountability, because they'll often challenge you to do certain things, and that's one of the things mentors do best that helps us is, and that's one thing I probably could put on the bullet points, is that mentors challenge us, and that challenging also helps us with our discipline. Because when we might be drifting, all of a sudden our leader says, you need to step it up here and here. I remember a time when I thought I was doing all I could do, and my mentor actually used an analogy and said, you have 2 arms and 2 legs, and right now you got to kind of become an octopus. You need to have 2 more arms and 2 more legs. And the point he was making is I needed to actually, even though I thought I was doing all I could do, I needed to redouble my efforts. I needed to, and he challenged me to increase my communication pretty dramatically within the team, in sending out letters and making calls. And I just squeezed more into that and figured out ways I could do that. And as I did, I increased conference calls, all this kind of stuff. But I also increased my one-on-ones with people. I made them more concise, all that stuff, gave them a shot in the arm, dropped them notes. and my organization made an explosive move upward because of all the feel good I poured on it. That was because a leader challenged me and gave me not only the challenge, but it was specific as to what I needed to do to move to the next level. And so my discipline increased because my focus and accountability increased, and all of a sudden we were getting a much different result with our team. And so you understand what we're doing. We'll review these again in a minute. Now let's talk about number 4. This was a huge thing to me. By the way, it was one of my 2 mentors that challenged me to develop a written plan and read it, who taught me about it. And then I immersed myself in it. But here's what happens with a written plan. Again, we take the clarity we get from our coaching, mentoring, some of the books we've read, notes that we've taken in different workshops, and I took that and started putting it together in a clear plan. Here's really what we're trying to do, is that you got to know what you want, why you want it, and how you're going to get it. Having well-defined goals, having the clarity about those goals, that means knowing what you want, putting down why you want it, and then very clearly putting down how you're going to get it. Everything from the recruiting numbers personally, and what you're going to do in the course of a year, what kind of monthly pace you want to be in, what kind of monthly pace you're going to be in your productivity and your field training, what you're going to challenge your people to be, what level they're going to be challenged to be productive at, your follow-up on everything from your meetings, your classes, your interviews, making sure your team's sharp in these areas. All these reminders is part of your how-to. And we're going to cover this. By the way, I'll announce that our next webinar is going to be just on this subject, developing a written plan and reading it. But I'll talk about that at the end. But knowing what you want, why you want it, how you're going to get it, it just absolutely transforms a person. When I got my business to print, and I had that 3.5-page thing, and I would read it morning and night, I started to develop a fanaticism in my focus that actually made competitors nervous because, man, I stayed on track. When you're checking off morning and night on everything you're supposed to be doing, everything that should be on your mind to run a great organization, wow. I mean, it's hard to get off track. You can only get a few hours off track, the most one day off track in any particular area. And as I would read it, I remind myself, it would remind me of things, man, I kind of dropped off of that. I got to pick up the pace. And it'd be the subject of the next leadership meeting or the subject of the next calls out to the organization, to our guys, and I would be following it up. I just never got far off track. You've heard me use this story before, but the original, if I remember correctly, Apollo 11 moonshot, whatever it was, the shot that reached the moon, was off track. It was off course literally 98% of the time. But because they were so attentive to making course adjustments, it never seemed like it was off course. Because they just started to get a degree off course and they would correct it. And so that's what you want to do in your career. And that plan gives you that discipline, that concentration. And so what I'm saying is you've got to control your own programming. And you just can't wake up and let whatever's happening in the day or whoever calls you or whoever drops by the office at any given moment control the direction of your team, control the direction of your business. You've got to control that because you have it down, you have it written, you're reading it, and it gives you world-class concentration, which is what all big-time players have. That's what they talk about in relation to the great athletes. And, it's interesting. There's a story of a former #1 tennis player in the world that before a great tennis tournament, one of the majors called in Wimbledon, if you're familiar with tennis, you've heard of it, in England, he was in the finals, and he was there in the locker room a couple of hours early. Of course, there's nobody else there but him and the other guy at that point, and that guy was at another end of it. And the guy took out a tennis ball, and he stared at the thing for 2 daggone hours. This guy was a maniac. He stared at the tennis ball. He said when he started looking at it, it was just a ball in his hand. He saw the hand. He saw everything around it, the locker room and the periphery. as he looked at it longer and longer and longer and longer, the ball seemed to grow. And what was happening is his concentration on it was increasing. He looked at the name Wilson on it. He looked at the seams. He's looking at the puzz. And the bottom line was, by the time he had spent 2 hours studying it, he said all he could see was the tennis ball. It seemed as big as a beach ball to him. And when he went out in the court to play the finals, which he won, he pounded the other guy. He said the ball seemed to be moving in slow motion. It was so big. That was because of the level of concentration he'd achieved. That was because of focusing on the thing that he was the most important thing that was out there, and that was that ball, right? And our game is defined in our plans. And when we stare at it morning and night, maybe read it once during the day too, those things become clearer and clearer, and our ability to make that happen improves. And it's exciting when you get in this state. You can't believe how well you do this business. You can't believe how dramatically you can compete with anybody. When I got here, I was basically unstoppable. And I think about having my sweetheart behind me. I was aligned my leadership. I was getting great mentoring, which of course improved my plan too. And I got that plan written, and I was reading it passionately morning and night, and it was incredible what started happening in my business. All right, let's look at number 5. Number 5, attend the meetings. You know, one of the things that happens is that sometimes we stop aligning with, again, this is part of the alignment process too, but here's what happens in the meetings. Even after you've had a good deal of experience and you kind of got it, here's what meetings do for you. If you're early, they're teaching you the business. They're keeping you energized. It's refueling. You know, in fact, go ahead and put that next one up. It keeps your energy up. One of the things we want to constantly be doing is strengthening our commitment. One of the things I used to use meetings for, once I had a good deal of experience, I love to be listening to leaders teach, my leaders, leaders above me in the business, and I would be kind of reworking my plan while I was sitting there. It was a great inspirational environment. And it was one of the times where I could kind of sit down, you know, and listen. And especially as I got further on in leadership, where I was up on the stage a lot, it was great to sit down, listen to leadership, have that part of me increase, right? It does energize you. It kind of reminds you of things, right, which helps you tweak your business. Importantly, you got to set the example for your team. And of course, one of the other things meetings do, though this isn't a webinar on meetings, is it gives you more opportunities for you to teach and grow. And that's a big deal. And so attending all the meetings is something that it doesn't seem maybe to some people as big a deal as it should be, but I'm telling you, you've got to have meeting discipline. You've got to be at the meetings, showing your team the way, constantly refueling, right? Keeping your commitment level up. And then, of course, you're having a chance to participate, and you don't want to miss that, because as you teach, you grow. No one learns more than a teacher, and as you teach your stuff, it sharpens you. It's kind of like the people who get to do lots of the VPMs, corporate overviews, get more energized about the opportunity. The more of that story you tell, the more conviction you have. And so for you not to be participating in the meetings and growing that way, right, will hurt you. But we're a meeting business. And if you're going to be a disciplined player and you're going to run this system, you've got to understand, you've got to show the way by attending the meetings, because you've got to help your people become more disciplined by attending the meetings. Enough said about that. 6th one of 7. Fill your schedule with appointments. Now, some of you are going to be sitting there going, really? That's what I need to do? I know you need to fill your schedule with appointments, but I want to give you a few tips on this. Because with a packed schedule, discipline is easy. You know, you look at we chose an example of a not very full appointment calendar. You know, that you wouldn't need to be very disciplined. It's interesting when you think about this. When you only have one appointment a night, let's say you have a first presentation, sales appointment, whatever, and you're sitting down at 6 o'clock. It is really easy to spend 2 or 3 hours around there, and nobody wants you around 2 or 3 hours. Maybe your family, but I don't. You know, if you're sitting at my home, you know, spending 2 or 3 hours there when you could have done it in 45 minutes or maybe an hour and a half, depending on what all you had to do. And if you had another appointment, you move faster. You're sharper. You stay on track better, you know, because you got someplace else you've got to be. I want you to think about that and how many of things that applies to. By the way, if you had a follow-up interview at 7 a.m. this morning, guess what? You'd have been in early, you know, and if you had appointments till late, you'd be putting in a lot of hours. You know, one of the things that I did is that I did make sure that I was doing lots of one-on-ones. We were doing our group meetings, of course, and multiplying our efforts. But I did one-on-ones too. And I did early on, actually for years, I tried to do all the follow-up interviews I could. I'd set them in a BPM, and I'd set those interviews with me. One, I was probably the best at it. Two, it was field training for the people who learned how to do a really good follow-up interview or, you know, second recruiting interview. But at the same time, it kept my schedule full. Because I remember during key stretches where I'd look at my calendar, and that week I'd have, seriously, you guys, 40, 50, 60, 70 appointments. Sometimes they were on the half hour, where I was helping somebody start the interview and get them jazzed and then turn the rest of it over to them. But I booked myself. I had to schedule time for my phone contact too. But my calendar was specifically assigned every hour of the day to something about moving the business forward. Lots of one-on-ones, lots of follow-up interviews, you know, lunch appointments, morning breakfast appointments, field training appointments at night, during the afternoon if I could get them. You know, because one of the things you want to be that'll help you with this is be a busy field trainer. But a field trainer just isn't. Most people, when I say that, those two words, field trainer, you just think of selling, you know, in the field. Well, that certainly is what should be probably the number one definition of a field trainer, maybe. But when I do follow-up interviews and that person that is watching their person be recruited, that's field training on follow-up interviews. When I was making calls to people to reach their market, that was field training them on how to make contact and how to talk to people that way. When I was doing a one-on-one presentation, I was field training people on how to do one-on-ones. Packed schedule. Discipline is easy. You're better organized. You stay more on time. You say things more concisely, right? You pack it. It keeps you sharp, energized. Be a busy field trainer. When you look at your calendar, you got a bunch of stuff set. And let me give you one more tip about this. My goal would be, when I was on top of my game, and it was one of the things I had written into my plan, my goal would be to have all my appointments set by the Friday for the following week. In other words, I wanted to get off to a fast start that following week. And so Friday, if I need to take a little time Saturday because I hadn't gotten it done by Friday, but absolutely by Saturday, I had to have the first few days of my schedule packed coming into the week. And then I used Saturday appointment, Saturday BPM, Tuesday BPM, whatever it was you were doing to book the rest of the week. But I knew that if I'm looking at an empty calendar, that's a disaster for a lot of reasons. You're not making much money. You're not moving people forward. You're not growing. But the reality is you drift when you have that much time. And so I really worked at filling my schedule. I knew I had to be the most disciplined, focused guy. And so I assumed that as many interviews, got out as much field training as I possibly could for years while building my organization. And it kept me sharp. All right, now I'm going to talk about the seventh one. And this one may sound a little odd to you, but it's not. That's not me, by the way. Obviously, I'm that fit, but I don't have a tattoo. Oh, shoot. At least I can crack myself up once in a while. Anyway, number 7, don't want or even expect it, or even to hope it's going to be fun all the time, because it's not. Winning's a tough business. The no pain, no gain thing. Sacrifice is part of the issue. But the reality is, sometimes people come in and they want it to be fun. This isn't a video game. This isn't about entertainment. There's going to be a bunch of stuff that's going to be fun. We're going to laugh about a bunch of stuff. There's going to be highs, getting great people, watching your people get promoted, having success in the field, seeing your income increase, starting to save a bunch of money, seeing that bless your family. That's fun. It's energizing. But man, in between is a whole bunch of work. Winning is a tough business. And you got to understand, there are no pansies in the major leagues. So people want it to be easier, want it to be fun. You see, the problem with that is it disrupts your discipline. Why? Because again, you've got this unrealistic expectation, and it causes you to get discouraged again. Because my expectations are realistic. And so if I'm starting a base shop, or I'm beefing up my base shop again, I know I got to make the calls. People are going to say no to me. I'm going to have to talk to a bunch of people that jack me around. No matter how much success I may have had, people are still people. Human nature is still human nature. I have to pay the price. I have to see the number of people it's going to take. I know if I want 30, 35 recruits, I got to talk to 100 people. And that's just the way it is. And if you close at a 50% ratio, if you want 10 closes this month, you got to be in front of 20 folks to attempt to make a close. And these are the realities of it. And you just got to go ahead and set your schedule and work the things that cause you to get there. And so it's a tough business. There are no pansies where we're going, right? But you got to set realistic expectations in the terms of the work that it takes. Here's another bottom line. You got to learn to grind it out and love it. And grind it out in the business, paying the price, fighting it. When I was doing that, I remember times Cindy would say to me, we must be growing. That was one of our code phrases for the fact we were tired, we had been paying a price, this was difficult and challenging, and we said we must be growing. Because those are the times we knew we were growing personally, that we were doing the things that caused the organization to grow. And I learned to actually embrace that feeling and love it. Because I knew we were getting it done. That we were going to win, that we were going to be somebody. That we were going to accomplish the things we wanted to accomplish. That we were going to get out of debt. We were going to have the kind of home we wanted for our family. We were going to be able to do those things. We were going to get a bunch of money in savings so we'd have peace of mind and all our debts paid off. And then we'd have this business that would provide for us for years. And then one day we'd be bringing our family into it. And it'd be blessing their lives. Awesome stuff. That's the dream. And so grinding it out was the path there, and I learned to love it. It's kind of like someone who learns to love their conditioning and that hard work in the gym, because they know what it's doing for them, their body, and the endorphins they'd be feeling as a reward when they're done working out. Their body would be rebuilding itself. The right things would be happening inside. They have more energy and vitality. It's easier to stay more upbeat and positive and optimistic. All of these things come when you learn to grind it out and love it, emotionally as well as physically. And so let's summarize. 7 steps of business discipline. Stuff to get done now, not late, right? Teamwork in the home. Align with leadership. Build mentor relationships. Develop a written plan and read it. Attend all the meetings. Fill your schedule with appointments. And don't want or expect it to be fun all the time. You have these things at work in your life. Make sure they're part of your overall plan, that this is what you got to do. And when you do, wonderful things can happen. All right. Now, I have one last thing to cover with you, which is what the next seminar is going to be about. Webinar, excuse me. I mentioned to you earlier that developing a written plan for your business is going to be what we spend our time on. We can't do it in the middle of the month because we're in New York with some of our up-and-coming folks, and I'm bringing most of the family there too for a few days. So that won't be a time to do a webinar. So we've moved it back a week to Wednesday, December 21st. This will be my Christmas present to you, is how to do a great quality written plan. I promise you, I take this subject seriously. I'll be very thorough with it. By the way, it starts 9 a.m. PST. I am kind of jokingly put what time that would be in Beijing. I heard Beijing is wonderful for the Christmas season. And so if you're in Beijing, you got to get up at 1 a.m. By the way, if you're in Tokyo, you got to get up at 2 a.m. For the webinar. For you world travelers. And ever since I got this app on my iPhone that tells me all these different cities, I'm always telling my family it's 6 a.m. tomorrow in Tokyo. It's actually lost its luster for them. I do it so often, but I still do it. Anyhow, so I'm going to start doing it to you now. It's 1 a.m. in Beijing when it's 9 a.m. here, just so you know. So Wednesday, December 21st, I hope will be a life-changing webinar. I know it will be for some of you, because when I got coached on this, it was such a dramatic thing in its impact on my life and my business. We'll address how you use these same principles for knowing what you want, why you want it, and how you're going to get it in other areas of your life. I'll have some discussions about how to help you with a physical game plan to be more in shape and that kind of stuff. And obviously I haven't been reading that one closely enough. But that is one of my resolves for 2012, and I'm not waiting. I'm writing that plan right now. But I also have done it for my family life. I've done it for my spiritual life. Whatever you aim these principles at will cause you to increase your focus and your clarity, and will increase your discipline in that area of your life. You want to increase your discipline spiritually? We're going to talk about how to do that. All these things. It won't be specifically about an improved spiritual life, but it's going to be about how you apply these principles to any area of your life you want to improve. You want to lose some weight and get in better shape? We're going to walk through what kind of things you need to remind yourself, and what format you got to have it in to get yourself programmed right. So it's really, like we said on that slide, for discipline, we're going to talk about how you can take over your own programming in a more aggressive way. All right, this I knew was going to be a shorter one. There's nothing wrong with that. And, a speaker is more popular if he can get done early. He or she can get done early. And so I'm going to reach for a little popularity today. And thank you for being on the call. It's fun covering this stuff with you. I love this overview. When I got this understanding, my life changed. And I'm looking at all the folks that are on this call right now, and I'm excited for the reach we're getting with these. And I finish as I traditionally do. It's a pleasure being in business with you. I love being your teammate. I will talk to you again in this format December 21st. And a special hello out to Rial Michaud's team. We had, Rial and I and that team had so much fun in Canada last week. And I can't remember the last time I had as much fun as I did with the team. And I thank them for their hospitality and their gracious attitude. And that was an aligned group. You could feel the magic. Anyway, love and appreciate you. Thanks a lot. Talk to you next month. Happy Thanksgiving. Remember to cultivate an attitude of gratitude. It sure helps our state of mind. And our families deserve it. Thanks. Bye-bye.